You must believe in yourself. Because if you don't, nothing else works. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how many goals you set, or how many people cheer you on. If deep down, you still doubt your own worth, you'll hold yourself back without even realizing it. You'll hesitate when you should act. You'll wait when you should move. You'll keep asking for permission that no one needs to give. Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they don't trust themselves enough to start. That's the truth. And if you've ever felt stuck, unsure, or invisible, this message is for you. Not to hype you up, but to remind you what's already inside you. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need more approval. What you need is a decision, right now, to believe that your next step matters and that you're strong enough to take it. So listen closely, and when it's done, listen again. Let these words become a part of your mindset, not just something you hear, but something you live. Share this with someone who needs a reminder. Leave a comment below and tell me, when was the last time you truly believed in yourself? And if this message resonates, subscribe to the channel, because this space is for people like you, ready to stop doubting and start building. Let's begin. 1. Real belief needs no applause. Ever seen the ocean before sunrise? No noise, no crowd, no clapping hands, just waves rolling in, doing what they've always done. That's what real belief looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask who's watching. It doesn't need likes, followers, or a standing ovation. It just shows up, and it keeps showing up, especially when no one else does. In a world obsessed with being seen, being shared, and being celebrated, it's easy to forget that true confidence isn't loud. It's quiet. It's consistent. It's the invisible engine that powers discipline, not the polished highlight reel most people chase. The people who build unshakable self-belief aren't waiting for applause. They're too focused on building something solid, too focused on taking the next step, even if no one notices. Especially when no one notices. When you truly believe in yourself, you stop performing and start progressing. You stop chasing noise and start building trust. One silent, disciplined act at a time. Because the truth is, belief isn't a feeling that comes after someone validates you. It's a decision you make before anyone understands what you're doing. And that decision gets tested every single day. You'll wake up and question your path. You'll wonder if it's worth it. You'll look around and see others praised for half the effort, while your quiet work goes unseen. That's when the world will tempt you to quit, to adjust, to pause, and wait for someone to clap before you continue. Don't. That's the exact moment when your belief is doing its real work, when it's being sharpened, not displayed. We've all had moments when we wanted someone to notice our progress, to say, "I see you," to acknowledge the work behind the scenes. But here's the hard truth. No one will ever care about your growth as much as you should. And if your confidence depends on applause, you'll be trapped in a cycle of seeking permission. You'll hesitate every time no one cheers. You'll start thinking maybe your effort doesn't matter unless someone posts about it. But the people who make it, the ones who build mental toughness and quiet strength, are the ones who kept going even when it felt invisible. They didn't need a crowd. They needed clarity. That clarity shows up in small, disciplined decisions. The choice to show up at the gym when your motivation is gone. The decision to stick to your routine when it feels pointless. The effort you make to speak with intention, to act with alignment, to train your mind when it wants to drift. That's the kind of belief that doesn't ask, "Am I doing enough?" but declares, "I'm becoming more," whether they see it or not. This is the foundation of emotional self-mastery, where your internal voice gets louder than the noise around you, where you stop depending on outside validation and start depending on your own follow-through. If you keep waiting for applause, you'll delay your progress. You'll wait for people who are too busy doubting themselves to fully support you, and you'll miss the quiet power of showing up with no witnesses, no reward, no recognition, just grit. Real belief is not tied to attention. It's tied to action. You don't get stronger by being noticed. You get stronger by doing the hard things when no one sees and still deciding that it matters. And when you do that consistently, something inside you begins to shift. You stop needing approval. You stop seeking validation. You stop explaining your plans to people who never understood your purpose to begin with. The ocean doesn't care if anyone is watching. It rises, it moves, it shapes the earth silently. That's how your belief should work. Not for attention, but for impact. Not for noise, but for growth. So if no one claps today, if no one says your name, if no one notices your effort, keep going. You're not here to be seen. You're here to become something real. Because once you believe in yourself quietly, you become someone who doesn't crumble loudly. You move through setbacks with poise, handle chaos with calm, and build something so grounded that no praise, no silence, and no opinion can touch it. If this speaks to you, save it. Listen again tomorrow and the next day. Let it train your mind. Let it become your new standard. And if you know someone who's doing the quiet work and getting discouraged, send this to them. Tell them, keep going. You don't need a stage to prove you're rising. Just the discipline to keep showing up without applause. That's a real belief. That's personal power. And that's where your breakthrough begins. 2. Respect yourself before the world does. I had a neighbor once, mid-40s, regular guy, nothing flashy about him. He wore the same windbreaker for years, always nodded politely, always on time. But what stood out wasn't his clothes or his schedule, it was his consistency. Every single morning, no matter the weather, Tom walked. Rain, snow, heat, it didn't matter. He walked. I saw him for months before I ever asked. One morning I caught up and asked, "Why every day, even when no one's out here?" He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Because I keep my promises, especially the ones no one hears." That stuck. Because that's what self-respect really is. It's not about proving anything to anyone else. It's not a performance. It's not built on compliments or validation. It's built on whether or not you can trust yourself to do what you said you would, especially when no one's looking. Most people associate respect with how others treat them, but true self-respect isn't reactive. It's internal. It's the quiet discipline that shapes how you move, how you speak, how you treat your time and your energy. When you respect yourself, it shows, not through words, but through action. It shows in how you carry yourself. It shows in how you walk into a room, not needing to prove anything because you know who you are before the room decides. That kind of self-belief doesn't need a spotlight. It needs structure. And structure begins in the smallest places. How do you get up when your alarm rings? Whether you keep the promise to hit the gym after work, or whether you stop scrolling and start reading that book you said you would. These may look like little things, but they aren't. Each act is a vote. Each choice is a signal to your mind that you're someone who follows through, that you're someone worth respecting. And when your actions and identity align, everything around you begins to shift. People start responding differently, not because you've changed how you talk, but because you've changed how you treat yourself. You show up differently. Not louder, not arrogant, just anchored. That kind of quiet strength builds something even more powerful than confidence. It builds credibility, not with the world first, with yourself. Without that, you're always performing. You're chasing status instead of substance. You might look impressive, but deep down, you feel shaky. Because you know when you cancel on your own goals. You know when you say, "I'll start Monday," and never do. You know when you delay action just because no one's watching. And those small moments of self-abandonment chip away at your power. That's the real cost, not failure, but the erosion of self-trust. To rebuild that trust, you don't need to go big. You need to go real. You need to keep one promise, then another. Then keep going, even when it's boring, even when no one cares, even when results are slow. That's how discipline builds confidence, how internal respect becomes visible in everything you do. Over time, people will notice. But by then, it won't matter. Because by then, you won't need their respect to feel strong. You'll already have your own. It's easy to wait for a title, a promotion, someone else's recognition before you allow yourself to feel proud. But that mindset is a trap. It makes your confidence dependent on circumstances you can't control. It keeps your value on hold, waiting for a stamp of approval. What if instead you acted like someone who already deserved to be respected? Not someday, but today. What if your tone of voice, your daily decisions, your boundaries, all came from a place of quiet knowing, "I am enough, and I treat myself that way"? That kind of shift doesn't need applause. It just needs alignment. Your life starts to organize itself differently when you carry that energy. You stop chasing people who drain you. You stop negotiating your time with distractions. You stop needing to explain yourself to people who never understood you to begin with. And no, you won't be perfect. But perfection isn't the goal. Integrity is. Real respect is built by how you behave when you're tired, when you're alone, when you feel like giving up. It's forged in the unseen moments, when you decide not to ghost your own growth. And the more you honor those small private choices, the stronger your foundation becomes. One day you'll look back and realize, the world didn't change first. You did. You raised your standard. You stopped waiting. You built a mindset of quiet strength. That's when people start asking, what's different about you? But by then, you won't be trying to answer. You'll be too focused living like someone who already knows. That's what self-respect looks like. It's not loud. It's steady. And it always begins with you. 3. Stop needing their approval. Imagine this. You walk into a room full of strangers. You carry something important, an idea, a goal, a piece of your future. You speak up, share it with conviction, and wait. But instead of support, you get silence. Maybe a glance, maybe a smirk, maybe nothing at all. What do you do now? Most people fold. Not because they're wrong, but because they mistook silence for rejection and hesitation for a verdict. But here's the truth. Your dream was never theirs to understand. It was never their job to clap. They weren't there in the quiet nights when you couldn't sleep, thinking about what could be. They didn't feel the spark inside you when no one else was watching. So why are you handing them the power to decide whether it's real? The approval you're waiting for might never come. Not because you're not capable, but because most people are too caught up in their own doubt to see clearly. They project limitations, not insight. They speak from their own fear, not your potential. And if you let that shape your path, you'll spend your life chasing nods from people who haven't built what you're building. That's the trap. You hold back your energy. You pause your voice. You stop yourself halfway through an idea, just in case someone frowns. But clarity doesn't wait for permission. It just moves. Approval might feel nice in the moment, but it's a dangerous fuel. It fades. It misleads. It turns your direction into a popularity contest instead of a purpose. The moment you stop needing their yes, your vision becomes yours again. You stop editing your passion to make it more acceptable. You stop shrinking your goals to keep the peace. And something powerful happens. You become focused, even when misunderstood. Because real belief doesn't ask to be validated. It asks to be lived. And the longer you tie your confidence to applause, the longer you delay your growth. Most of the people who will question you haven't done what you're trying to do. They haven't put in the reps. They haven't felt the fear and chosen to move anyway. So why are you shaping your identity around their opinion? Think about it. How many ideas have you killed because someone raised an eyebrow? How many paths have you ignored because someone said, that's not realistic? These moments seem small, but they add up. Over time, they train you to look outward before you act. And eventually, you forget how to listen to yourself. That's not emotional self-mastery. That's self-abandonment dressed in politeness. If you want to reclaim your power, you have to break that cycle. You have to learn to sit with disapproval without folding. You have to get comfortable with the silence that follows when you stop explaining yourself. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone should. Some people are only in your life to reflect the version of you that stayed small. And when you start growing, they'll flinch. They'll say you've changed and they'll be right. But that change is not betrayal. It's alignment. You weren't meant to live in the cage of their comfort zone. You were meant to evolve. And growth requires space. It requires rejection. It requires people misunderstanding your path and you continuing anyway. You don't need a spotlight. You need standards. You don't need constant encouragement. You need quiet strength. The kind that builds when you act with conviction while others hesitate. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. And clarity only comes when you stop trying to make everyone comfortable with who you're becoming. So if you walk into a room today with an idea that matters and they don't respond, good. Let that be your test. Will you keep moving? Will you keep building? Will you keep trusting yourself without their permission? Your belief should never depend on their understanding. Not because they're bad people, but because they were never assigned to your calling. That's your job. That's your voice. And until you take back ownership of it, you'll keep giving away your peace one opinion at a time. So the next time you share your vision and they stare, laugh, or look confused, breathe. Then say it again. Then do it anyway. You don't need their applause. You just need your own approval. Earned through action, shaped by consistency, and rooted in self-respect. That's how clarity is built. That's how belief gets strong. And that's how you stop waiting and start becoming. 4. You are the one who checks on you. I wish someone would hold me accountable. We say it as if it's a noble request. But often, what we really mean is, I want someone to remind me because I'm not sure I will. And that's where the truth starts to unravel. Because accountability that depends on someone else isn't a strength, it's a delay. It's outsourcing your responsibility and disguising it as discipline. The moment they stop texting, the moment they get busy, the moment they don't ask how you're doing, you slip. Not because you're lazy, but because you never built the habit of checking in with yourself. And belief built on borrowed reminders, it breaks the first time life goes silent. Real belief looks different. It's quieter, but it's stronger. It doesn't wait for check-ins. It is the check-in. It doesn't ask, is anyone watching? It asks, did I keep my word? And that question, when asked honestly, is how you reclaim personal power. Because if your consistency only works when someone is clapping, it's not consistency. It's performance. The real work happens in silence. When you show up tired, when the inbox is empty, when the phone doesn't ring, when no one is tracking your progress but you. That's when belief either fades or roots itself deeper. It's easy to stay focused when everyone's supporting you. But what about when they don't? What about the mornings when no one cares if you hit snooze, when no one is watching if you quit halfway, when no one texts to say, keep going? That's when your inner voice matters most. Not the loud motivational one, the quiet one, the one that says, I said I would, so I will. That voice isn't built overnight. It's shaped by repetition. It's trained through mental clarity, not hype. It becomes sharper each time you finish a task no one asked you to do. Each time you protect your energy from useless distractions. Each time you follow through on your own standards without waiting to be seen. This is where discipline builds confidence, not through show, but through follow-through. Because when you hold yourself accountable, you stop needing applause to feel motivated. You don't crumble when plans shift. You don't stop when motivation dies. You keep going because that's what you promised. That's what belief with roots sounds like. It doesn't rise and fall with attention. It grows steadily beneath the surface, anchoring your actions in purpose, not pressure. The danger in relying on others to hold you up is that they can't always stay. Life moves fast. People have their own battles. Even those who love you the most will forget to check in. But your goals, your peace, your growth, those are your job. You're the one who must guard your routine, build your habits, and reset your focus every day, even when no one claps for it. That's the quiet power that makes you unshakable. Because while everyone else is waiting for a push, you've already started moving. It's tempting to believe that growth must feel exciting to be real. But the truth is, the most powerful shifts are quiet. They happen when you ignore the urge to justify your delay. When you look at the task in front of you and do it anyway. When you stop romanticizing the big leap and start honoring the next small step. Self-trust isn't earned through talking. It's built by doing. And when you become the one who checks on you, you no longer depend on anyone to validate your effort. You become a self-led force. You gain inner confidence, not because you feel strong every day, but because you've seen yourself rise through doubt. You've shown up when it wasn't convenient. You've continued when the path felt slow and unrewarding. And now, you don't just believe in yourself, you respect yourself. That respect becomes the compass. It tells you when to say no, when to rest, when to push. It turns your mindset from emotional reaction to calm, steady leadership of your own life. So if you're still hoping someone will hold you accountable, ask yourself this: what happens when they don't? Does your goal disappear? Does your identity fade? Or do you rise anyway? Because the version of you that's built to last, the one that's consistent, disciplined, and steady, isn't built by external voices. It's built by you. Through decisions made in silence. Through an effort that no one claps for. Through showing up, not because someone checked in, but because you did. That's a belief, that's ownership, and that's the kind of self-respect no one can take from you. 5. Discipline is your answer to doubt. How many times has this happened to you? You get an idea, a good one. Your heart says yes, your energy rises, and for a moment you feel ready. But then it creeps in, that voice, the one that whispers, "You're not ready. This isn't the right time, or you'll probably fail." And just like that, you pull back. Not because the idea was wrong, not because the goal wasn't worth chasing, but because you gave doubt the final word. It happens more than we admit, not because we're lazy, but because we haven't learned how to respond when the doubt shows up loud and early. It always knocks. That part won't change. What matters is how you answer. And belief doesn't answer with words, it answers with action. The moment you choose to move anyway, you start building something stronger than motivation. You build trust, not just in the idea, in yourself. You train your mind by how you respond under pressure. And every time you choose to do the hard thing when doubt says don't, you're teaching yourself that your decisions carry weight, that your direction doesn't shift with emotion, that you can be steady even when your confidence wavers. That's not just discipline. It's belief in motion. It's choosing to act before you feel like it, choosing to show up even when the excuses feel reasonable. That's how you rebuild personal power, not by waiting to feel ready, but by doing the thing anyway because you said you would. And when you act from that place, doubt starts to lose its grip. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer leads. Doubt is not the enemy. Believing it without questioning is, and discipline is how you fight back. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to win the battle in your head all at once. You need to make the next decision a strong one. You need to sit down and work. You need to show up at the time you promised yourself. You need to stick to the schedule you made before your mood changed. That's how you reclaim consistency. Because discipline doesn't care how you feel. It only cares whether you act. And when you begin to act from discipline instead of emotion, your life starts to stabilize. The noise quiets, the self-doubt doesn't vanish, but it's not driving anymore. This is where mental toughness is built. Not when everything is going well, but when your mind is throwing reasons to quit, and you still move forward. You don't debate, you don't overthink, you don't negotiate with laziness or fear. You do the thing, and in doing so, you develop something stronger than confidence. You build credibility with yourself. That quiet knowledge that you're someone who follows through. That you don't shrink when pressure comes. That you don't wait for the perfect moment to prove you're ready. Because readiness, in the end, isn't a feeling. It's a result. It's the product of discipline repeated long enough to create momentum. And once you have momentum, everything changes. The world respects discipline because it doesn't depend on attention. It doesn't fade when support disappears. It moves, it builds, it sharpens. Every time you show up tired, every time you push through the fog, every time you keep your word when no one else is watching, you're not just surviving the day. You're reprogramming your identity. You're becoming someone who doesn't back down just because doubt speaks. That's what emotional self-mastery looks like. You don't argue with the voice that says you can't. You answer it by doing it anyway. By refusing to fold. By proving quietly that your will is stronger than your fear. So next time the doubt shows up, don't fight it with thoughts. Fight it with action. Don't wait for your energy to be perfect. Don't wait for clarity to arrive before you move. Move, and let the clarity follow. This is how you teach your mind to trust you again. This is how you stop being ruled by uncertainty. This is how belief becomes your foundation, not just something you say, but something you prove. And it always starts the same way. One disciplined decision. One act of courage. One silent moment where you move forward anyway. That's the power of discipline. It doesn't shout, it doesn't convince, it leads. 6. Act like your future self. Now picture two versions of you. One keeps saying, someday I'll change. The other wakes up and says, let's go. One keeps waiting for the perfect moment. The other creates it. Most people spend their lives stuck between those two versions. They know what they want. They even feel a spark of motivation at times, but they keep pushing action to a later date. They say, once I feel more confident, or when life calms down, or after this busy season. But that mindset quietly steals their progress. The truth is, You don't grow into your future self by accident. You grow into it by acting like them, now. Not next month. Not after the doubt disappears. Not when it's convenient. The transformation begins the moment you stop waiting and start aligning. And alignment means your choices begin to match your vision. Your habits start casting votes for the version of you that you claim to be building. This isn't about faking it. This is about choosing it. Because every day, through every decision, you are proving something to yourself, not to others. You are either reinforcing the version of you that stays comfortable, or you are building the one who breaks patterns. And it shows up in small, ordinary moments. The food you choose, the way you speak to yourself, the time you wake up, the way you handle frustration, how you respond when no one's watching. These are not minor things. They are bricks. They are votes. And the more consistently you act like your future self, the less you need to talk about change. You become it. People wait for clarity. They wait for energy. They wait to feel ready. But readiness is a lie we tell ourselves to delay responsibility. There is no right time. Life rarely hands you perfect conditions. That's why you need discipline. That's why you need mental clarity. That's why you need to stop asking how long it will take and start focusing on how committed you're willing to be. Because when you act like the person you want to become, you begin to detach from doubt. You begin to rely less on motivation and more on identity. And identity, when it's built on consistent, small decisions, becomes the strongest foundation you have. You don't have to remind yourself who you are when your actions already say it for you. Think about what your future self would do right now, not the fantasy version, the focused version, the one who is calm, consistent, confident, and centered. That version doesn't wait until things feel easier. That version doesn't live off approval or distraction. That version builds discipline, protects peace, and acts with intention. And here's the thing. You don't need to have achieved everything to start behaving that way. You start now. You train your emotional self-mastery in today's routine. You build quiet strength by doing what's hard while the results are still invisible. You don't skip steps. You install systems. And that changes your trajectory because your days begin to reflect your purpose, not your patterns. There will always be a reason to delay. There will always be resistance. But the more you practice acting like your future self now, the less power those reasons hold. You stop getting distracted by every mood swing, every opinion, every setback. You gain emotional discipline. You begin to recognize that belief isn't a thought, it's a behavior. It's what you do when no one claps. It's what you finish when no one checks in. It's how you show up when your excuses feel valid and no one would blame you for quitting, but you don't. So ask yourself today, what would that future version of you do with this moment? Would they waste it scrolling? Would they wait for approval? Would they justify the delay? Or would they use it? Would they move with quiet power? Would they stick to the plan? Would they put in the work? If the answer is yes, then do it. Not for the outcome, but because you're tired of watching potential sit idle. You're tired of letting doubt win. You're tired of carrying a vision you keep postponing. Act like that person now and let the rest catch up. The growth will come. The peace will build. The focus will sharpen. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you're not pretending anymore. You've become the person you kept talking about. You didn't wait. You aligned, and that changed everything. 7. Decide that quitting is not an option. Building yourself is like climbing a mountain. The beginning feels good. You take the first few steps with energy, you look around, and everything seems clear. The sun is out, the air is fresh, and for a while you believe you can handle the journey. But then it changes. The next 500 steps feel long and thankless. The path is less visible. Your legs burn, the sky gets cloudy, and somewhere deep in the climb the fog rolls in. That's where it begins, not the climb, but the test. Because that's where most people quit. Not at the start, not at the summit, but right in the middle, when no one's watching and nothing feels exciting. Not because they aren't strong enough, but because they didn't decide before they started that quitting wouldn't be on the table. Quitting is always easiest when it's silent. There's no shame, no confrontation, no big announcement. It shows up quietly in thoughts like, maybe tomorrow, or maybe this isn't worth it. And without noticing, your momentum fades. You step off the path, not because you failed, but because you left the door open. But belief, the real kind, closes that door before the climb even begins. It doesn't wait for the pain to arrive. It makes the decision early. The decision that says, no matter how slow it gets, I'm not turning back. That's the difference between those who reach the top and those who only talk about it. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not motivation. It's endurance. Quiet, unshakable endurance. The truth is, there will be days when you feel invisible, days when you question if it's working, days when you're tired of doing the right thing with no reward. And that's exactly why the decision matters, because when you remove quitting as an option, you stop using your feelings as the guide. You start acting from discipline, from intention, from identity. You start becoming someone who moves forward, even when everything inside you says stop. That's not emotion, that's commitment. And commitment is what builds the kind of belief that doesn't fall apart in hard times. Look around. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they negotiate with resistance. They treat every obstacle as a debate instead of a workout. They gave up not because the mountain was too steep, but because they kept asking themselves if it was worth it every 10 steps. That kind of mindset wears you down. It makes every little bump feel bigger than it is. But when you decide that quitting isn't allowed, the obstacles stop being threats. They become part of the climb. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop begging for the peak to come faster. And instead, you lock into your rhythm, one solid, focused step at a time. You don't have to be the fastest climber. You don't need perfect gear. You don't need an audience. What you need is the strength to stay in it, to show up when the trail is lonely, to keep building even when the results aren't obvious, to say, yes, it's hard, and I'm still going. Because on the other side of that mindset is a version of you that knows exactly what you're capable of. A version that doesn't crack under pressure. A version that trusts themselves fully, not because the journey was easy, but because they didn't run when it got hard. Every time you push through, you add another layer to your inner strength. You train your mind to believe your own words. You develop emotional resilience. You build mental toughness that no one can give you and no one can take away. And that strength doesn't fade with applause. It doesn't vanish when others stop checking in. It stays. It grows. Because it was never built on motivation. It was built on a vow. I don't quit. Not today. Not when it's slow. Not when it's frustrating. Not even when I feel behind. And if you can hold that line, if you can carry that mindset, you'll become the kind of person who finishes what they start. Not for show, not for praise, but because it's who you are now. The climb never promised to be easy, but it will always be worth it if you decide from the start that quitting is not part of your story. And once you make that decision, everything else becomes simple. Not painless, but simple. One step, one promise. One day at a time, no matter what. 8. Refuse to shrink for their comfort. Maybe if I talk less, they'll accept me. Maybe if I don't share this idea, they won't feel insecure. Maybe if I slow down just a little, they'll stick around. These are the quiet thoughts that creep in when you begin to grow. They don't shout, they whisper. And the worst part is they often sound like kindness. But shrinking yourself for someone else's comfort is not kindness. It's self-erasure. It doesn't come from weakness. It comes from a deep desire to belong, to keep the peace, to avoid standing out too much. You tell yourself it's temporary. You'll speak louder once they're ready. You'll show your full self once they feel safe. But slowly, without noticing, you abandon pieces of who you are. Not out of fear, but out of over-accommodation. And eventually you forget what your full voice sounds like. Respecting others doesn't require abandoning yourself. You were not meant to dim your light so others don't squint. You were meant to grow, even if that growth exposes what others are unwilling to face in themselves. Because real belief doesn't adapt to keep everyone comfortable. It expands. It elevates. It walks into the room and says, "This is who I am becoming," without apology. And yes, that will challenge people, not because you're wrong, but because you're different now. And people don't always know how to respond to someone who no longer needs permission. You're not responsible for their reactions. You're responsible for your direction. And the moment you start editing your pace, your voice, or your ambition for someone else's approval, you slow your own becoming. That's the real cost. Not their discomfort, but your delay. You waste days, weeks, sometimes years trying to manage the emotional reactions of people who are only meant to walk with a smaller version of you. But growth doesn't negotiate. It doesn't explain itself to those committed to staying the same. It invites, but it never begs. If your success makes someone uncomfortable, that's their mirror to face. You don't owe anyone a smaller self just so they can feel secure. You don't have to dim your leadership, soften your discipline, or water down your standards to be accepted. That's not a strength. That's self-abandonment in disguise. And belief, true belief, refuses to live in that disguise. It says, I'm not going to dim my light for someone afraid to shine. Because that's what quiet confidence. It doesn't need to push others down, but it refuses to shrink just to be allowed in the room. And it's not easy, especially when the people who flinch at your growth are close. Sometimes they're friends. Sometimes they're family. Sometimes they're people you used to depend on for validation. But closeness does not equal alignment, and history does not equal the future. Just because they were part of who you were doesn't mean they're built for who you're becoming. And that's okay. Growth costs comfort. It costs a connection. It costs you the time of people who no longer fit your pace. But what you gain, clarity, peace, purpose, self-respect, is worth it every time. Belief in yourself means choosing alignment over approval. It means standing taller when others try to make you feel too much. It means keeping your voice steady even when it shakes. And most of all, it means refusing to go back just to be liked. You don't need to apologize for being serious about your life. You don't need to explain your need for silence, for focus, for high standards. That's not arrogance. That's ownership. And ownership is the core of personal power. It is the opposite of shrinking. You've spent enough time folding to fit into spaces that didn't honor your energy. Enough time to minimize your vision to avoid tension. Now it's time to expand, to speak fully, to move boldly, not to offend, but to live aligned. And if someone pulls away because you're growing, let them. That distance is not rejection. It's a revelation. It shows you who's with you for the climb, not just the comfort. And when you stop shrinking, you make room for what's real. For the relationships that don't need you to dim. For the people who celebrate your clarity. For the life that reflects your full capacity. So the next time that voice says, tone it down or don't outgrow them, ask yourself, who benefits when I shrink? And who suffers when I don't? Your truth deserves space. Your ambition deserves action. Your voice deserves its full volume. Refusing to shrink isn't about being loud. It's about being whole. And once you choose to be whole, you stop chasing acceptance. You start choosing alignment, and that changes everything. Belief is not a feeling. It is a decision you repeat quietly, daily, without applause, without approval. You don't wait for motivation. You train your discipline. You don't ask for permission. You walk with clarity. The truth is, no one will hand you the life you deserve. You build it, brick by brick, habit by habit, thought by thought. If this video spoke to something inside you, don't let it fade. Watch it again. Let the message sink in deeper every time. These aren't words for entertainment. They are tools, ones you must apply. Use them each morning to reset your mindset. Use them when doubt creeps in. Use them when the world goes silent and you're tempted to give up. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself, reclaim your peace, or protect your vision against the noise, share your story in the comments. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because belief grows stronger when we practice together. You must believe in yourself, not once, but every time it's tested. That's how you take control of your life. That's how you become unstoppable. Starting now. Starting with you.